So 3, 2, 1.
All right. Rita, would you like to?
All right. I'd like to call the May 18th meeting of the Scott WMO Watershed Planning Commission to order. Please take it through the agenda, and do we have any suggested changes?
Yes, Madam Chair. I would like to start the meeting by doing a roll call of commissioners.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Weaver?
Here.
Present.
Present.
Commissioner Pint?
Present.
Commissioner Casillas?
Present.
Commissioner Vierling?
Present.
Commissioner Schmidt? Commissioner Schmidt?
Yep.
There he is. Commissioner Shea?
Present.
All right, and Commissioner Thiel, I don't believe is present today. Madam Chair and Commissioners, we would like to have an addition to item 6 under new business. Staff is requesting to add item D, which is the Love Shoreline Protection application. It's an action item that came to us a little bit last minute, but it is necessary for us to request this item because it is dependent upon our EPA funds. Information on the cost share was emailed to the commissioners last Friday.
Okay, we will add that into, well, do we have a motion to amend the agenda as suggested?
Commissioner Pint will move to add the item as presented under item number 6D.
Do we have a second?
Commissioner Vierling will second that.
Okay, I'll do a roll. Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casillas,
Aye.
Commissioner Vierling,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
Commissioner Shea.
Aye.
Motion is passed.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes. Are there any suggested edits to the meeting minutes or a motion to approve the minutes?
Commissioner Vierling, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Schmidt, second.
And I'll do a roll. Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casillas,
Aye.
Commissioner Vierling,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
and Commissioner Shea.
Aye.
Motion is passed. Next up, staff reports. Troy?
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, Commissioners. The staff report is in your packet. I will refrain from going through it in similar detail as the past. I just do want to point out, however, that if you look at the first item, if I can direct your attention to the graph, you'll see our number of service requests. And what this does is showing you really from month to month the number of landowners we're assisting with different types of conservation questions or issues. They can range from erosion to wanting a rain garden to any number of things, water quality issues, buffers, you name it. The thing I wanted to point out is if you look at the number for May, we're at about 250 active conservation requests. And well over 100 of those are at various stages of project planning, development, or implementation. The reason I wanted to point out is if you look at the trend, we can see from it that the impact that the pandemic might have had on our interest or level of service has not waned yet. We anticipate that there may be a lag time, but right now since the beginning of the year, we've had 90 additional requests for services since January, and 2/3 of them have come in from between March, April, and May. So what that tells me is that things haven't slowed down. There's a lot of interest, and maybe in some odd way, it's causing people to think and maybe want to do more things than usual, or at least not affected in a negative direction. So, and right now, the amount of work that we're doing is as busy, if not busier than any other year, maybe because we've had fairly decent weather to do a lot of projects, and they're proceeding forward. So at this point, staff remain very busy implementing the WMO's technical assistance and cost share program. We're full steam ahead on the education activities, just figuring out different ways to do things. And I think in the near future, you'll see more and more information coming out about virtual meetings or webinars on workshops and things like that, which will be going forward, like I said, just in a different format. And a lot of the other work, what we're finding is that the volume of work we're able to do while we're sheltered in place, i.e. working from home, is more than I think than we had anticipated at first. The staff are able to go into the office to grab a vehicle or grab equipment they need, monitoring, survey equipment, things like that. Grab that stuff and head out in the field. They're doing that with social distancing and everything else. But I'm feeling that confidently that we can continue providing a high level of service more than we had expected to be able to, given this. And we're all kind of just learning how to do our work differently, not necessarily less work or less effective, just different. So it's been actually a good learning opportunity for us, but staff is holding in there and really focused on continuing to deliver excellent service, and both to the landowners as well as to the Planning Commission and WMO board. So if there's any questions specific about the report, I'd be glad to try and answer them.
Thank you, Troy. Does anybody have any questions?
Commissioner Weaver, I do have a question, but it actually relates back to last month's report. So I can say that for old business, or I can ask it now, whichever you prefer.
We might as well ask it now.
Okay. Say, Troy, going over the report from last month, and I want to encourage you to continue to keep working with the cover crop program. It sounds like we're making some good success there. The question I had, though, is I got a little confused based upon the fact sheets and kind of how we are incentivizing our farmers. I know we have a $30 an acre per year with a max up to 2,000. So I'm trying to interpret that. Does that mean that, so the max would be up for like 66 acres times 30 would give you roughly 2,000? Or does that mean that you can do a multiple year incentive? And I'm just kind of trying to figure out, reconcile, you know, the variations that we have so much in the terms of total cost for various projects we put in place.
Yes, good question, Commissioner. Let me just pull up something quick here. Sorry. Actually, I can't. Ryan, maybe you could help me out with this, if in case I mix up some of the numbers. But we do have two different tiers, if you will, of cover crop incentive. One is single year, where they can get $30 an acre. We're trying it 1 year. And Ryan, I need your help, as I don't have work right now to the docket.
Yep. So I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
The max on a 3-year is $40 an acre, and so it comes out to be maximum of $12,000 that we can put towards a multi-year project. And I'm just getting into it now what the single year maximum is, because it is $30 per acre for that as well.
But there
I
is
just
a,
gotta,
I think there's a cap on here as well.
so there's a maximum for a one-time incentive is 2,000. So you're right, Virgil, it'd be about 66 acres then.
Right, so that's it. We have the single year for those who aren't yet ready to commit to a multi-year contract. And we provide less of an incentive for that and a higher incentive for those that are willing to try it on for 3 years in a row. So that's how it's right now.
Okay, Troy, thank you very much. Yeah, it explains everything very, very well. So I appreciate that because it was very confusing. Maybe if I can just make a request, is it possible when you do your fact sheets that you could indicate whether it's a 1 year or a 3 year commitment that help us understand kind of where why the discrepancies in terms of total costs?
Absolutely. Yep. No, that'd be easy addition. Be glad to do it.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
You bet.
Any other questions for Troy? All right, if not, on to the Scott WMO. Vanessa?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So as Troy mentioned, the WMO and SWCD are very busy right now. While we are all staying safe at home, it has not slowed down our operations or any of our projects or activities. Staff is very busy out monitoring our water resources and that program up and running, as well as working on CIP project maintenance and those programs as well. One of the other big activities that staff is working on is projecting budget for the rest of 2020 and looking at ways to help maybe streamline the budget, provide some budget cuts for 2021. The county is forecasting a bit of a budget loss, roughly about $1.8 million going into 2021. So as a division, the planning and natural resource area are all working together to try to help provide some of the best recommendations we can, dropping anything that is unnecessary, just to really help tighten our belts as much as possible to help the county to move forward with as little budget necessities moving forward, but still really maximizing delivering what matters and still implementing our plan and our projects and our requirements under statute. I think we were able to do that. One of the more difficult areas for us is the natural resources budget. So while that's not part of the SWMO budget, the SWMO comes off of a separate levy. The natural resources budget is funded partially off of the general levy, and that takes care of things like plan review, development review, any of the stormwater drainage issues, as well as some of the AIS funding. Now, a lot of the AIS funding is implemented through grants, so that won't be impacted, but that has been a pretty heavy work area for us for the last month and probably won't lighten for the next month or so. But we probably should foresee seeing some budget options to help streamline the budget being proposed probably in either June or July. And then the other area that staff's been working on is watershed-based funding. So we're kind of part of a new Lower Minnesota River South work group, and that work group had its first convene meeting a few weeks ago. Currently, that group was working on the criteria deadline for how we will prioritize and identify key projects moving forward. So this is again that 2-year biennium that we received from Bowser, which is how watershed-based funding will be moving forward. There's a really wonderful group of different agencies. Troy is part of that, of course, with the SWCD. Everything from Scott County all the way up to, there's even a tiny bit of Capital Region watershed, although I who they're participating. So it is a rather large work area. But it is roughly also just shy of $900,000 that we have to determine how to allocate for the next several years. So that's been a really interesting partnership. And then outside of that, I think I'll probably roll into our next new business item later on. I'll kind of touch base on the 319 9 Elements grant. So that's all I have for staff updates right now, other than in case anybody does ask, the SWMO staff, natural resources staff, are continuing to telework. As Troy mentioned, we are able to provide all of our excellent services by teleworking. Those that we must perform face to face, we're continuing to follow our operations plans, and those tend to be outside. Those are all outside, actually, with landowners, and we limit the amount of time and contact we have with those residents, doing as much work via email as possible, and only meeting with them when absolutely necessary. But again, it's a critical part of the work that we do to ensure that we're delivering again our services and implementing our plan. So the WMO will continue to work that way. We don't right now foresee appointment meetings. So as the building rolls into meetings by appointment only, we're not going to pursue that at this time. However, should that be necessary or important, we will pursue it. I am open for questions.
Are there any questions for Vanessa?
Yeah, Vanessa and Sarah, this is Kevin Shea. So I'm just so we're kind of clear on some of this. So if people need you to come out and look at sites and everything else, we're still able, or you are still able to socially distance and everything else and go out there and still be able to perform, especially outside. I mean, as far as doing the work and then going and checking sites and different things and updates and anything that we need to do, we're still okay with doing all that work, correct?
That's an excellent question, Mr. Shea. For clarification, yes. So through our approved operations plan, site visits have been implemented since the beginning of field season, so yeah, roughly this month. The SWCD obviously performs several of those, like erosion sediment control inspections and some of those tax visits. The actually detailed logistics are identified in the operations plan. Staff adheres to it, and then also ensures that all of our subcontractors or our partners like the SWCD follow that as well. So for example, Ryan was at our CIP site on Sand Creek. They were doing a little bit of final maintenance, and so our subcontractors there, including Interfluve and the contractor, they were social distancing, they weren't passing on materials, they were following the operations plan. With individual residents, again, it's as much correspondence via phone or email, limiting site visits in person as much as possible, only when necessary. So we're going to continue doing that. And yes, we have been following that protocol. If there's a time at which that operations plan needs to be updated, I certainly will, based upon the county's direction. But right now that does fit within policy and safety guidelines, and has been working really well. So yeah. Does that answer your
question? Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
I have not a question, but a comment too. As you move forward with the team that's working on using the watershed-based funding, I'd be interested in knowing how you guys decide to prioritize. I don't know if that'll be included in your future updates, but
I would be happy to include that.
thank you. Any other questions for Vanessa? All right, if not, we can move on to old business. Ryan?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, so I've only got a brief,
Take this off while I'm
take
talking.
this off while I'm talking.
I've
Only got a couple brief
updates
updates for you this evening.
Let me pull up
sites I just went to. So
Back to Commissioner Shea's
question
question
about
about
site
site
visit.
visit.
So this site visit occurred
Last week,
and
basically what I did is that the landowners did want to be a part of the site visit, so I just called them when I arrived. Didn't go up to their door. They just came out, met me. We stayed our required distance away. Didn't share any materials with each other, and then then just departed at that point. So. But this site is, and maybe some of the commissioners may recognize it, we've discussed it in the past. It was identified in our feasibility report as a potential CIP. Some of the underlying issues of when we went out there to look at it, as you can kind of see, we think the culprit is actually more of the groundwater seepage coming through the bluff, more so than lack of stabilization at the toe, which is the toe stabilizations are all the other CIPs that we had constructed. And so this one's just a little bit different. And at the time that we looked at it, the site was maybe half as big as you can see now, and so it didn't represent a huge environmental benefit. Talking with Great River Greening, we thought about pursuing a much less expensive option, but it was also maybe somewhat experimental. So we were actually planning on trying to just establish vegetation on this slope versus all the other CIPs. We would build the log jams at the toe. Since we're thinking that groundwater was the issue, that doing something at the toe really wasn't necessary to try to stabilize this site. And we also had kind of identified a lot of the other CIPs that we were pursuing for construction. So we knew we had a limited budget. At that time, the landowners weren't interested in doing the project, and this is actually what we were proposing. So one of the biggest key elements of the project is the upper buffer here, and that's where we ran into a little bit of hesitation on the landowners back in 2017, I think is when our conversations kind of ended with them on the last time. So this erosion site is getting relatively close, maybe within 100 feet or so of their house. And this buffer, we need to offset it because that very top edge of the bluff is vertical. And we know that being vertical, it's not going to stay that way. And so it's going to have to continue to erode. And so this buffer would be offset a certain distance. We're kind of projecting maybe a 3-to-1 slope. Out and then starting the buffer from there. And that was taking up too much of their backyard is what they had indicated. Now, because the erosion is growing at a fairly rapid rate, they're quite concerned. And so now they're sort of wanting to explore this option further. And so the idea being we try to put shrubs and trees up at the top buffer, set that distance back, still allow this to erode. This would be sort of we call it a jute matting. It's just a heavier duty, but it has a lot of voids in it. We'd lay that down, and we'd also seed underneath it. We'd also put 2 coir logs along the slope. We'd lay them, parallel to the stream itself, and then kind of space them apart. And what they're intended to do is, as water comes down off of this slope and continues down, we're hoping that it doesn't rill as much as it is. So it's just intended like a speed bump down that slope. We'd also do some shrub plantings on the bluff face, and then where you saw that steep, we were thinking of doing willow live staking to try to get a species that likes to have wet feet and see if it can't establish along that steep. Here at the toe, we would do a row of dogwood and then willow stakings as well. So a lot of times cedar tree revetments will have those stakings in them, get the willows maybe a little bit closer to the water, and then the dogwoods further up. And then we did talk about doing a cedar tree revetment, and it's not necessarily intended to
reduce
reduce erosion along the toe. It's more meant to have a shelf to kind of build some of the sediment that keeps continually coming off the upper face.
So
So if there is some erosion going on at the toe, the cedar tree revetment might minimize that, but also it's intended to sort of have a place for that sediment to accumulate.
So I
bring it up is because we're just kind of looking at the budget, and we've got a little bit of funds left in our EPA grant. Our phase 4 site, the one we've been talking about recently, just wrapped up construction, and I received the final bill. And it looks like we're at about roughly $3,700 left in EPA funds. And so it's not much that we could use toward this project, but it does represent something. And so we just wanted to sort of bring this up as informational that the landowners are interested in pursuing this again. I told them, because they had some hesitation the first time, that the upper buffer is still very critical to the overall project, and that we would want to see that stay. And so I kind of gave them a grace period of about 2 weeks to sort of sort out some of these financial aspects, bring it to your attention, see if there's any questions or concerns, and then get back to them and see if they're still interested at that time.
So I'll
stop there and see if there's maybe any questions about this site before next project update.
What's the elevation drop there from their backyard?
So it's
about 40 feet. So our last project site was about 30 feet at the max point. So it is a little bit higher. And oddly enough, you can almost throw a stone from our last project site to this one. And it's not a surprise because of all our CIP sites are kind of in that same area where the creek drops substantially in elevation.
So it's
a decent sized site, and it's from my site visit in 2016 to now, it's probably doubled in size, and that's what the landowners thought as well.
And it's 2-to-1 slopes that you want to use there?
Yeah.
Well,
ideally we'd like to try to get it at a
3-to-1. That's the thought being at 3-to-1. That maybe that's where vegetation can start to maybe passively start to establish. We would try to jumpstart areas that are maybe at a 2.5, 3-to-1 as it's further down the slope, closer to the stream.
That's
where we'd probably focus more of those plantings on. And as we go up the slope, as it gets steeper, the plantings are less and less likely to take in those areas because of the steepness. And so we probably wouldn't focus much of those shrub plantings up in that area.
Other questions for Ryan?
Yeah, Ryan, this is Kevin Shea, Commissioner Shea. I'm I heard you mention the courier logs on that project. I don't have visibility to things. I'm just doing a phone-in call here, but how has the performance been on those courier logs on the projects that you've been on? Because the McMahon Lake and the courier logs were used a lot, and the only thing you see anywhere along the lake where there were courier logs are just the sticks left that held them in. They've all eroded, and basically they don't do any shoreline protection. So I'm wondering if that is something that we should be spending the money on these courier logs when they don't seem to do anything, and they basically seem to have failed everywhere on McMahon Lake there. I just kind of see what you think about that.
Sure. Madam Chair, Commissioner Shea, I guess my experience with courier logs, we haven't really used them too much on projects. I know Lakeshore projects, you do see them often there. Just trying to think off the top of my head. I don't know if maybe the constant wave action, where they're constantly having that kind of water hitting them, maybe that's potentially causing them to come loose. With this, it is somewhat experimental, I would phrase it as in we're hoping that this is a low-cost solution. When we had originally pitched this, it was we were thinking in the neighborhood of maybe $10,000. And so in comparison to the other CIP sites, substantially less cost. And so there's always the potential that maybe the coir logs wouldn't work. It is somewhat based off of our conversations with our design consultant, where they've indicated they've put these on steeper slopes, and they have slowed the water down. Now, this site may be different, but that was sort of the concept, is that they've used it in the past in this type of setting, in its work, but, time would tell as well. And it looks like Melissa maybe has some feedback too.
Yeah, Commissioner Shea, so at least in the past, the projects that I've worked on lakeshore restorations, the coir logs weren't meant to be completely submerged, at least from the way I learned how to install them and use them. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely been an issue on McMahon Lake with the water level rising and submerging everything on those lakeshore restorations. So unfortunately, are you saying it's completely gone? The log is completely gone?
Yeah, so just take my property, for example. With stacked coir logs, we could only do, on the whole shoreline, we could only do 200 feet of the riprap, or the rock, and then we had to do coir logs for the rest. And we actually did install them where it was double stacked. The first one was stacked in the water. It was already submerged when we put it in.
Okay.
So if it's not designed for that, that might have been a pretty bad design flaw in itself. But yeah, basically they're all gone. There's nothing left.
Well, and Troy,
So I
maybe
just wonder if we're using those on future projects, especially if we're talking about money. Maybe that's just something we shouldn't be doing for future things to have to go back and fix them. And I guess is my point on that.
And Troy, maybe you have some feedback on what the manufacturer has stated on them, but
Yeah.
in the past, we've never submerged them.
Yeah. Commissioner Shea, I'm not sure on the design specs about submerged or not. I do know is that they are intended to be temporary features, and they're designed to allow the actual live vegetation an opportunity to get a hold, knowing that over time the coir log itself would disintegrate. We have experienced times when the coir log has let loose and floated away, or become loose some other way, but that's more of an installation issue than it is a resilience issue on the coir log in terms of maintaining its effectiveness. But in the end, when the coir log does eventually disintegrate or otherwise loses effectiveness, the whole concept is that the plants that you plant behind them, whether shrubs or native grass or whatever else, is what actually your long-term solution becomes. So, and they're definitely not the answer in every situation. You got to be careful.
Right, and I guess that's kind of the point I'm trying to bring up, is maybe we should be careful when we're designing these, as far as, spending the money on these. If we're not, it doesn't sound like we're 100% sure on the design, maybe that's not something the money should be going into. And I'd be happy to have, once people can actually go out and take a look, come out and take a look and see the failure rate on these, all, around here and possibly other places. But yeah, I just don't think that's a solution myself that we should be going after. That's just my opinion. But I mean, I just hate to be, thinking that we're putting money at something that is not working.
And Commissioner Shea, I'll be doing a post-treatment survey on McMahon Lake next month, so I can also make that observation when I'm out there surveying.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just going to add a final thought. I think this is a really excellent conversation, and I'm very thankful to Commissioner Shea for bringing this up. He is correct. Coir logs are not necessarily the best application in all situations. Certain sites don't tend to take well. That being said, we'll follow up with McMahon and check those. We do know that there are several issues with the high water also impacting those shoreline restorations, and we are following up with how to go back and maintain those, because of course those have been affected by the flood. And of course, looking forward to just verify that we do our due diligence and ensure that those are best practice at the time. It's a combination of cost and effectiveness. So as Commissioner Shea mentioned, there are other things out there. There are certain projects though, like this one, where lifts just would not be a cost-effective option. That doesn't mean that we have explored all alternatives. So we will be sure to do our due diligence and follow up with that in the future.
Any other questions or comments for Ryan on this item?
Chairman Weaver, this is Commissioner Panches. Quick question for Ryan. You mentioned you had about $3,700 left in these EPA funds, and you have the site that you're talking to the owner with. Should this owner decide not to move forward, do you have another project that you have in mind, or would you be open to looking at a different project in order to use up these funds?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Pint. So the plan would be is if this project didn't consume those funds, and I think if it went forward, it would likely consume them all. But if it doesn't, and we get an extension from MPCA, which thus far they're indicating is likely, which would then give us a full other year to implement these funds. Then we would look at rolling them into either the cover crop budget or all other BMP practices, how we've got this one structured. So we would use it towards projects.
Great, thank you. My only concern was obviously I don't want to lose these funds, so make sure we have something as a backup plan. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, did you have other project updates, Ryan?
Madam Chair, yes.
Madam Chair, yes, I had one more brief update. So just to let you know, our phase 4 project is complete now. We did come in just slightly over budget. It was, I think, about 2,600. But if you remember, it was all by request that we had made. We had asked for additional trees. We had asked for some additional grading. And so they were requests that we had made. The original bid was roughly about 37% below the engineer's estimate. So even though we came in, about $2,000 high on a $183,000 project, it's still considerably lower than the engineer's estimate that we had originally budgeted for that project.
And that's all I have.
And that's all I have on that.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other questions for Ryan? Okay, Melissa, do you have any project updates?
I do, yes. So I've been working quite a bit in the last month on coordinating the camp and the AIS work. The camp program has been delayed, obviously due to the shelter in place and COVID-19. So we've been waiting for Met Council to be able to tell us when they can start and when we can get our supplies from them. We did get the contract in place and will be dropping off the supplies to me tomorrow. And so hopefully I'll be getting the kits out to our volunteers this Friday, and that will be for Thole, Cedar, and McMahon Lake. I have started the lake pretreatment surveys. On Friday, we surveyed McMahon Lake, and we found lots of curly leaf there. And Ryan, do you have that picture that I sent you?
Sure do.
Sure do.
So we found lots of curly leaf around the lake, and in some places it's about 5 or 6 feet tall right now. So, so that will be treated tomorrow. Also, while we were out there, we saw some boats violating the no wake order. There is a sign at the public access that says there is a no wake restriction on the lake. So I did end up calling Sheriff Water Patrol. And I do have a larger no wake sign in the office that I just need to get out to the access and get that one installed, switch out the smaller sign. But I think typically we also have the buoys out. So we do have no wake buoys, and they're set 150 feet from shore. And I do coordinate with the New Market Sportsman's Club on that. And my contact is Mike Shea, and I did call him on Friday just to see kind of where they were at, if he's talked to the sportsman's group about what they feel comfortable doing at all, if they feel comfortable bringing them out or not.
Melissa, sorry to interrupt. This is Kevin Shea. We are putting the buoys out on Wednesday night.
Oh, perfect.
So we'll be putting
Thank
them
you.
out. We'll be putting them out. Yeah, we'll be putting them out on Wednesday night, just so you know.
Perfect. Thank you very much, because I had my notes to ask you. So,
Okay. No, we're good to go on that thing.
okay, great. The O'Dowd pretreatment survey is scheduled for tomorrow, and I would like to schedule Thole for this Thursday. And Cedar has already been treated. I'll be doing the post-treatment survey on that the last week in May. The DNR has not been given permission to go out and do any surveys yet, so Scott County or the WMO has to do that ourselves. We typically do it with the DNR. They like to do Cedar because we have a lake vegetation management plan on that lake. And I did hear from the chair of the Cedar Lake Improvement District that the lake looks great from the treatment. Commissioner Casilius, what are your observations about the lake? Have you been able to get out on Cedar, or have you talked to your neighbors about their perceptions on how the treatment turned out?
You know, I have not been able to get out on the lake myself yet. We don't have our pontoon in yet. But the reports I'm hearing from people seem really positive, and all the board members are in agreement as well, that I think so far so good. We're pretty happy with the results.
Okay, great. Great. Just a couple more quick updates. So with the McMahon dewatering last year, we did cause some damage on the landowner's property that let us stage the pump and the filter on his property. Basically ruts from the tires, having to driving it in and out on there to get fuel to the pump. Our county highway crew has helped us repair that, and they did it really quickly. And so I went out and made a site check on that last week, and it looks really good. And the landowner's very satisfied with the work that was done. I also took a lake level reading on McMahon Lake on May 12th, and we are, well, on May 12th, it was 1.5 foot still above the ordinary high water level. After this rain this weekend, I'm not quite sure where it's at, but as we were talking earlier, I know here in Elko New Market, we've got 3.5 inches over the weekend. So I'll probably try to take another reading, maybe another week. I know we got another round of rain coming. So Commissioner Shea, did you notice any bounce yet? Or maybe it might not see it for another few days, but we notice any bounce from the lake from the rain that we got?
Oh yeah, it's it's up a good 4 inches from what it was on even Friday, and then it'll go up more here, I'm sure, in the next couple of days. Everything else seeping in. But yeah, we got very good 4 or 5 inches here.
That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Melissa, I had a question. This is Commissioner.
Sure.
I did send you what I found as far as curly leaf. I don't know if you got that. It was late afternoon. So there was some presence off the end of the dock versus last week, although it's probably about, I think maybe 2 foot's the highest I saw, maybe 1 foot to 2 foot in length.
Okay.
At any rate, I sent you the pictures and you should have them.
Okay, great. I'll check my email when we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
So question, with McMahon, the plan A is to hopefully get flood damage reduction grant to do that outlet. Do we have plan B?
Not at this time.
Okay.
We are going. We think that it's maybe unlikely that we're going to get any,
Yeah.
flood reduction grant money, considering what we've heard from the state budget so far. So I am planning on creating some kind of a Zoom meeting maybe with landowners. I'm going to coordinate that with Megan, our water resources engineer. So hopefully we can get the landowners together and talk about next steps. But I can't exactly say what that might look like yet until we officially hear from the legislature. So.
And can you remind me, I don't know if you remember offhand, how long we pumped last fall and how much it went down?
Yep, we pumped for 30 days and it went down 14 inches.
And Madam Chair, I'm just going to jump in here real quick and add to Melissa's excellent update. As you recall, we do have $130,000 set aside as our match this year for McMahon. Should we not receive funding, we would propose using part of those funds to help with drawing down McMahon at least this year. We haven't proposed that officially yet, but that's where I'm looking at funds because that's what I have available right now. And then, as Melissa mentioned, I did ask her to again meet with the residents to look at our path moving forward. So while the pandemic has put a little hiccup in our plans and certainly our funding, and we may not have an immediate funding option availability to us, we do want folks to know that we're still committed to finding a long-term path forward with this. But at least in the immediate future, what I will likely be proposing to the WPC is to allocate some of that $130,000 towards at least a drawdown of McMahon this year. And also, if you might recall, we are also assisting with the drawdown of Markley, which has actually been looking really good. So our portion, we're doing a third of it with Prior Lake and Credit River. Prior Lake is actually the lead on that, and our portion of that was 16,000. So we currently are working on 2 different lake drawdowns already this year. So
The cost for pumping last year too, isn't it like 20 or 30,000 for McMahon?
the actual pumping cost, well, it was probably closer to, overall, it's probably around $40,000, but that included culverts, permits, some different things we necessarily need to purchase again this year. I would probably project a safe estimate is closer to $20,000 this year, yes.
Okay. Any other questions from Melissa? Okay, hearing none, I think we can move on to new business. Vanessa with the 9 elements 319 work plan.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. It is getting long here. We've had some wonderful conversations, but I will try to keep this short. I just wanted to give you a little heads up that we are working on our work plan for, I'm going to say work plan like 3 times. I'm so sorry. Our work plan for our 9 elements 319 grants. So the 319 grants are another program where they're changing a little bit how they implement those, much like the watershed-based funding. Part of what the WMO has been working on for the last couple years is an EPA approved 9 elements plan. So these 9 elements are what the EPA determines are important for implementing water quality improvements and meeting standards. Our plan was the first in the state to be approved. It was approved in February this year by the EPA, which allows us to qualify for the 9-element plan funding through MPCA. Well, more specifically, it gives us significant more points towards getting funding in that grant program. At this time, you'll notice the map that I have in front of you is just kind of a general outline of the different, what we're calling management areas. It's loosely based upon watersheds, but in the plan, it's a little bit organized also by just kind of work areas. For the first round of funding, which is this year, but lasts 4 years, our focus does need to be in those areas where we already have approved SWAs, some watershed assessments. So we'll be focusing on area 1 up there at the top, which is Pika Creek. Area 2, which is kind of in the middle. It's kind of Cedar in the main branch. And then I'm also proposing area 5, which is Porter Creek and the headwaters of that area, simply because we have a few additional studies which I think might qualify. These are 4-year grant cycles. It's $280,000 and covers 40% of project costs. It would be one of our primary sources of funding moving forward for CIPs. So it doesn't technically cover feasibilities or subwater assessments, but it does cover a lot of the project costs and some other things depending upon how you phrase it. So, for example, we can't technically say easements, but we can say land transfer. So PCA has been absolutely wonderful at finding flexibility in this program. So we're very excited by it. And we'll be bringing more to you and the work plan in June. I just wanted to give you a little bit of heads up. This is one of the bigger things we've been working on. So.
Great.
Any questions?
Any questions for Vanessa? Or Vanessa, yes.
Yes.
All right. Hearing none. Melissa, do you have more to add on the camp and AIS overview?
Yes. So Vanessa actually asked me to do this. So at the beginning of the year, she asked Ryan and I to copy her on all of our emails so she could get a better sense of what we do day to day in our jobs. And I've been pretty busy with the camp and the AIS program, so she's just noticed how much coordination and communication it takes to make these successful. So she thought it might be helpful if I kind of gave you an overview of all the detail that goes into running these 2 programs. So I did in your packet include a bulleted list. I was just going to try to quickly go through these. I'm sure you read through them, but I'll just go through them because I have a few more things to add in each one. So the CAMP program, which stands for Citizen Assisted Lake Monitoring Program, the season runs from April through October. As I said before, we're running a little bit late. Typically, we've been pretty good with keeping volunteers on, but if we do have a new volunteer, what that takes is I usually have to go to the Lake Association to see if they know of anybody who would be willing to do it. And then that volunteer has to go through our county approval process to get approved to be a Scott County volunteer, which involves them filling out paperwork, going through a background check, and actually getting approved by the Scott County Board of Commissioners. So, but typically with this program, I check in with everyone early in the year, January, February, just to make sure they're all still on board. I also, around that time, receive an email from Met Council wanting to know if we're participating, which lakes we're going to have in the program. And then usually about a month or 2 later, we'll get the agreement with Met Council. And I do read through those every year. And even though they're the same contract, I just want to make sure nothing's changed and everything's still correct in them. But then that does have to go through our contract approval process, the review process. And then Met Council usually requests a list of supplies, so I have to go through the kits that I collect at the end of the year. I check all the equipment, make sure it's working. If anything's broken, then I'll add that to the list of supplies that I request from them. And then Met Council delivers those supplies, and I add them to the kits, and I end up coordinating with a volunteer to deliver those kits. And then in their kit is a schedule of when we would like them to take the sample. And 3 times throughout the season, I go and pick up those samples from the volunteers. So when they take the sample, they freeze it. That's the preservation method. And I go 3 times throughout the year and pick up those frozen samples. And when I bring them back into the office, I double check to make sure the field sheet matches the sample bottles or the label on there, just to make sure there's no mix up in the lab. And I also make a copy of those field sheets because when I finish my field surveys at the end of summer, DNR asks me for the transparency information that the volunteers add to that sheet. And it's helpful too if the volunteers happen to make any kind of notes or observations while they're out there, besides the observation questions that are asked. That might help explain something in water quality that we see, any kind of changes. And then with that last sample pickup or sample collection, I also take the kits from them at the end of the year and bring them back to the office and store them. And then I obviously review the invoice to make sure that they're charging us correctly for how many samples we actually submitted to them. And so this program I really enjoy because every time I usually go out and collect the samples from people, at least if they're home when they give me the samples, they like to talk about the lake and tell me new things that they saw and stuff like that. So it's I enjoy the interaction with them and they enjoy it also. So I'll just quickly move on to the curly leaf treatments. So we currently have a 3-year contract in place, but getting that contract in place is quite the process. So I have to write a request for proposals, and there's a lot of detail that goes into that on what we want to see from the vendor on how we want the lakes treated, what concentration, depth, volume. There's a lot of different detail that goes into that request for proposal. And I review those with each lake association and we make a decision together. So starting early in the year, I do apply for the DNR permit to treat. DNR requires that I send out a notification to all landowners in that treatment area because they have the option to opt out. If they don't want the treatment to occur in front of their shoreline, they have to tell me that. In past years, we've only had, I think that happened twice, where one person didn't want the treatment to occur in front of their shoreline, so I had to relay that information to the vendor before he treated. But it also takes, I store the boat over the winter, I have to go get that out of the storage and coordinate a survey helper for the year. I keep the Lake Association members informed, up to date on treatment dates or survey dates, so that they can either post it on their website or let their association members know. Before I go out for the pre-treatment surveys, I do coordinate with volunteers on the lake. Commissioner Vealing happens to be my plant watcher on Thole Lake to let me know when curly leaf is growing, so I know when it's time to go out and do the survey. Because if I go too early and I don't find anything, DNR makes a final decision on where we can treat. So if I don't find anything, they're not going to let us treat the lake. So I want to make sure I go out when it's actually growing and that we find it. I do, as I said, perform surveys, pre-treatment and post-treatment surveys, send all that data to the DNR, and thankfully, they make the delineation determination. So what that means is they'll take the data when I go out to look for the curly leaf. They'll take that data and basically create a map on where our vendor can treat the lake. And typically throughout the year, there's just other communication that goes on with with the lake associations. But the pre-treatment and the post-treatment surveys are very important because the post-treatment survey informs us for next year of where curly leaf is coming back, that we may have missed it, that it may have started growing later. And so we'll know to kind of look for those areas the next spring when we go do the pre-treatment survey. With watercraft inspections, we're really new at this. This is our second year. If we decide to do it next year, which I don't see why we wouldn't, but we would look at possibly doing a 3-year contract like we do for curly leaf treatment. I do check with Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District in advance to see if they want to be partnering with us on one contract with the inspections. This year they chose to contract with a vendor themselves. Last year, I know I gave a presentation on the report of what the inspectors found. So I used that information to create a schedule for the consultant doing the inspections for us this year on which days, what hours we saw the highest inspections. So that information was really helpful in planning for this year's inspections. Now, the DNR is not doing inspections, at least not yet. They are planning for it, but they have not been given the okay to do watercraft inspections this year. So local counties who are using this program and hiring a private consultant are maybe the only ones doing inspections on our lakes this year until DNR gets the okay to do that. So I think you can read through the rest of the bullet points on the memo that I put in there, but there's a lot of different coordination and communication that happens with these AIS programs. I also have what we call the Adopt a Doct program. We're monitoring for zebra mussels. Again, Prior Lake is the only lake in Scott County that has zebra mussels. We don't want to get those in the rest of our lakes. So we created zebra mussel samplers a few years ago and gave them to volunteers on the lake that monitor and watch for possible zebra mussels in those other lakes. And so I just check in with those people once a month. All they have to do is pull it up and take a look at it, see if there's anything stuck to the plate, and just send me an email and what they see. But well, that's about it. I mean, it's a lot of communication and a lot of coordination, but it's interesting and it's fun for me. So with that, I'll just open it up to any questions if anybody has any.
Madam Chair, I would like to just add that the key piece of all of this is not just you all understand how much Melissa really does do, but for some of us who are new or for commissioners who are new, it's good to understand how those programs work. But more importantly, that these are critical volunteer programs. Without these volunteers and those partnerships and those relationships, we could not have a functioning monitoring program. So this is really an important aspect of the work that we do. And while it does seem that Melissa, and she really does do an exceptional amount of work into this, without it, we couldn't have these programs without these volunteers. So we're very grateful and thankful that we have it and we continue to have it moving forward.
Yes, thank you, Melissa, for all your work on this. I think they are important programs. So, any questions for Melissa? Okay, next, project maintenance. Ryan?
Madam Chair, Commissioners. So I've just got a brief overview to fill you in on a few of our CIP projects that we observed either last year or this year that need maintenance, which we would like to pursue this year. So first site is a riparian buffer at Ridges at Sand Creek Golf Course. So if you remember, we installed 11 different sites on the golf course. Now, almost every site looks like it's in really good condition. However, one site did experience erosion last year. If you remember, we had ice jams on Sand Creek around the city of Jordan.
And so
we just had really high water levels, and that caused some erosion. Well, that erosion actually was on a stream bank where we had the riparian buffer. So here's an example. This is hole number 5, where it looks great. So this was actually one of our bigger buffers that we installed out there. So it's this whole stretch here. And that one was looking like it was in great shape. And much of the other ones were as well. This is hole number 13, where there is some erosion occurring. So we had a buffer planted along here. You can see where the buffer is actually still intact in here. But here's where some of that erosion occurred. So what we're doing right now is last year, late in the year, we surveyed this. And so kind of the conversations we were having is Ridge's superintendent may pursue fixing the erosion on his own, or we may work together with them either financially or technically on fixing that. Now, I'll be honest, I have not touched base with them here yet this spring, kind of with everything going on. So, and golf courses are just kind of now opening up. So this will be one of my next steps, is kind of getting a hold of the superintendent and the owner, and then seeing, it's possible that they maybe already fixed the erosion, and if so, then we could just replant the buffer, and if not, then we'll work with them on fixing the erosion. Once that's done, then we'll replant the buffer. Are there any questions about this project site? Okay, I will move on to the next site. So our CIP phase 1 site. So this one, if you remember, is actually just downstream of the Ridges at Sand Creek Golf Course, and then just south of the city of Jordan. So this is the one that we completed in 2017. So during those same ice jams in the spring of 2019, a log in one corner of a log jam that was kind of in the middle of the site broke. The rest of the structure is intact. However, talking with Interfluve, it wasn't a necessity to fix it immediately. However, they are recommending that we should kind of bolster that structure with placing rock around where that log broke off. And what that will do is just further protect the structure itself. So what ended up happening is there's a really large rock here, and it was pushing flows kind of right to this corner, and we suspect, a larger piece of ice than hit the vertical log that is supposed to be right here. You can actually see a piece of it sticking up. So there should be one vertical log there. So the plan is to, we'll have to bring in rock. We'll bring in rock and then place it kind of all around this area. And then that's the log itself. And so what we're just trying to do is prevent flow from undermining anything on this backside here. So we'll try to, bring in a decent amount of rock to place there. Any questions on this maintenance site? Okay, we got one more site. So our Quarry Creek project, which we completed in 2016, there are 3 areas that need some maintenance. Area 1 is a culvert that sits in front of the sheet pile structure that needs to be cleaned out. And the landowner, if you remember, we did a little bit of maintenance work on this particular property. It would have been in the fall of 2018. And at that time, we could see that the culvert was filling up with sediment. And my picture is actually on the next slide, from that time period. So it looks a little different, but it's more just to kind of show you where the culvert is, and you can kind of see how it's filling up with sediment. Area 2 is where a tile line is covered up, and it's actually forcing some overland flow of water. an erosion near one of our grade control structures. This seems like a really easy fix with a mini excavator. We kind of know where that tile line is. Basically, just exposing that, and then we'll move some of the rocks that are already protecting this inlet, and we'll just kind of shift them around a little bit, and that should kind of cover up some of the erosion. Area 3 is where there is either a damaged tile line or a seep on the back side of that same grade control structure. It's causing sloughing on the backside slope. This one is not as easy of a fix because we just don't know what is causing it. The landowner is going to look for any records of a tile line that he may have with his farm service agency records. From construction, I did talk with the inspector that was out there frequently, and we did recall one tile line that was out there, but not in this particular area. However, sometimes those farm records are spotty, you know, as to what was recorded and on a document out there for a tile line. So the plan is to get our Public Works Department out there and look at this site and kind of do an assessment and see what they think. So area 1, you can see here's the culvert. So what ends up happening is there's not much grade on the channel that leads to this point. Here's our big retention structure. So you get kind of water ponding up in this area, and as it flows through the pipe, there's just not a lot of grade, and it fills up with sediment. So we'd like to maintain all 3 ways that this structure releases water. So this is the first way it does. When it starts to fill up, there's holes cut in the sheeting structure, which are all intact and fine and no issues. And then if it does get high enough, actually, sorry, say this 4. If it gets high enough, comes in through upright culvert, and then actually there's a spot in the sheeting where it's cut and it's a little bit lower than what you're seeing on the side, where it can flow over. So we like to maintain that, and it does look like this is something that we'll probably have to clean out every maybe few years. Area 2, it's such minor erosion that it's not real easy to kind of get a picture of it, but what's happening is there's a tile line that's blocked in front of the grade control structure inlet, and so what that's doing is it's causing some of this water that otherwise would be going through that tile line to come overland, and it's just scouring a little bit here. It's one of those sites on both sides of it, but right now it's not too bad, and it's a really easy fix, whereas if we wait, it potentially means hauling in rock and trying to fix it that way. So we'd rather get on top of this right away and fix it while it's still very minor. Area 3, here's where there's kind of this sloughing occurring. So you kind of see there's a kind of abrupt change in grade on the back side of this grade control structure. So this is actually a diversion berm that leads to that inlet. The worry is that if this continues, if it is a broken tile line that we can fix, we potentially could hook it into maybe this tile line here as well and take it down to the bottom. If it's a seep, that's going to be a little bit more interesting, and I'll probably consult with our Public Works Department on potential fixes if they've done something like this. But the worry is that if this continues and it erodes back up this slope, potentially it compromises the actual diversion berm itself. So that kind of concludes all 3 of those sites. So our Public Works Department is going to, they've indicated they'll help us with the Quarry Creek project and also the CIP project of bringing in rock. The buffer project should be pretty easy to do. In Virgil 2, you actually place in the riparian buffer planting out there. We could get a pallet of native plugs, and one person could almost get it done in an hour or so just to plant the one buffer. So that shouldn't take too much time. It's more just waiting to get the erosion fixed first. So that'll stand for any questions about any of the sites.
Any questions for Ryan? Okay, hearing none, I think we can move on to the Love Shoreland restoration?
And Chair Commissioner, so this is the addition to the agenda. I just have to find it here amongst everything else. My computer's being a little slow. All right. So this is a shoreline protection project for John and Marcia Love along Cedar Lake. Located in Helena Township, the total estimated cost for the project is $1,484, which would all come from the WMO. This represents 70% of the total cost of the project, with the landowner then contributing the remaining $636. The proposed funding source is the EPA grant. We do have the available balance for this project. If you remember, currently this project grant expiration date is August of this year. However, NPCA is indicating that we're likely to get an extension, but that's why, if that does not happen, we wanted to get this in front of you today, just to keep the project moving along and give us the best chance then to spend the funds and also be within the native seeding window as well. There's a 20-foot section of shoreline on the Love property that's regressing at an estimated 1 to 2 feet of shoreline. It does say per year. I did talk with the technician on the project, or the technical representative, and so we've only really observed it for the 1 year. So it could have been more of an erosive year than in years past, but just wanted to kind of clarify that. It regressed between 1 and 2 feet in the last year along that piece of the shoreline. The proposed project is to regrade the bank, the coir logs at the toe of the slope, and restore the upland area with native plants. This would be one where we could just, double check on the coir logs and make sure that they're appropriate and installed kind of at that correct location too. This will help stabilize the shore and reduce any future erosion from wave action along Cedar Lake. The reason why it's in front of you today is that all shoreline protection projects do require a review. In this case, normally the Scott SWCD screening committee members review the application before the WPC. However, with the WPC meeting moving up a week, the Scott SWCD has not reviewed the application yet. They plan to do so at their meeting, which is tomorrow. So just want to make sure that that is known if you wanted to make it contingent upon their, if they do approve it, if you want to make it contingent on their approval as well. So with that, I'll stand for any questions. And then here's a fact sheet that shows where along the shoreline it is, and then also a current project site photo.
Safe to assume that staff recommends approval, right?
Madam Chair, yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Ryan?
Commissioner Pence here. I have no questions. If there are no other questions, Chairman Weaver, I would recommend recommending approval of this project contingent upon the SWCD Advisory Board approving it also, moving it then to the commissioners.
Do we have a second?
Commissioner Veerling, I'll second that.
Okay, I will do a roll. Commissioner Weaver?
Aye.
Commissioner Pint?
Aye.
Commissioner Pint?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Casilius?
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Aye.
And Commissioner Shea?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion has passed. And that is it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
And I won't delay us, I promise. You know, I live on Cedar Lake, and I'm familiar with the Love property, but there in the past 2 weeks there have also been two shoreline projects where the residents have brought in big ginormous boulders to put back on the shore. Is that something that the commission gets involved in, or that's not something we get involved in because they're not asking for funding assistance?
Madam Chair,
Madam
Commissioner
Chair,
Casilius.
Commissioner Casilius.
So
So
we you would be
you would be
notified
notified if
what they're
what they're
proposing to
proposing to
do
do requires a permit
through
through
our
our
planning and zoning
planning and
ordinance.
zoning ordinance.
So
So currently,
if a
if a
landowner is
landowner is proposing land disturbances, you know, fill or excavating greater than 10 cubic yards,
they should
they
be
should be
applying
applying
for
for a permit
Scott
through
County.
Scott County.
Also,
Also,
if the work
if the
is
work is
below the
below the
OHW,
OHW,
then
then they should concurrently be
applying for a permit
applying for a
through the
permit through the
DNR
DNR as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Commissioner Beerling, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
And do we have a second?
Commissioner Shea, I'll second.
Tom.
Has left the meeting.
I will do a roll. I was worried there for a minute. I thought we all were going to hang out for dinner. Commissioner Weaver.
Aye.
Commissioner Pint.
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius.
Aye.
Commissioner Vierling.
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Commissioner Shea.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
The motion is passed. We'll adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Kevin Shea.
Has left the meeting. A participant has left the meeting.